We acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship the Kaurna people have to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome everyone to JamFactory's Wednesday talk. Today we're going to hear from the talented South Australian glass artist Giles Bettison. And if you'd like to join me in welcoming Giles.
Afternoon. I was just going to really quickly whip through a bunch of pictures and the idea or about what I've been doing. So in about 1990, I decided that I wanted to pursue glass and knew about glass blowing from friends of mine that were at the JamFactory in the 80s and stuff, and was interested in sort of the fluid nature of that material because I'd been working in metals and timber and stuff like that, and working with the liquid thing seemed like fun, but I was interested in finding about if there was a graphic possibility with molten glass, and there was, that I discovered that was going on in Italy. So I eventually went to the ANU and did an undergraduate degree majoring in glass at the art school there, and made a bunch of things. I think I was telling someone that I made a pattern that someone told me looked like a pair of shorts. That's it. Now they always look like shorts, but someone told me that at an exhibition where that was, and they said, "Oh, shorts," and then I couldn't see anything but shorts in that. But I made a bunch of stuff as a student, and it all went pretty well, and the school was just about to, the funding model was just about to change, so they went nuts trying to promote themselves to get fee-paying students, and so the way they did that was using students. So my work got pushed out into competitions in Europe and the United States, and so I, as a student, got quite a lot of exposure and got invited to exhibit my work around the place while I was still completing my undergraduate degree, which was pretty cool. So straight out of art school, I got to travel a lot and just went like obsessive compulsive about this technique is called Marini, where you make little patterns inside of a glass rod and cut the cross section. And I was really fortunate because one of the gallerists that represented me right out of art school had a gallery in Zurich, and she was really good friends with the daughter of one of the big glass factory owners in Venice, and I got to go around and get shown all of these insane things that they'd been doing in Venice for hundreds and hundreds of years, stuff like this. And I also got to see a lot of European galleries and look at a lot of abstract paintings. I really like paintings, and got exposed to a lot of textiles. And my work developed looking at abstraction, but turned into a vessel, and using textiles as a way to do that. So I started making work that was using textile references. I got to see a lot of African weaving, silk weaving and stuff, and just initially I was sort of scared by colour, like I was not quite sure how to do it, and just thinking, oh, if you put the wrong ones together it's going to look really awful. But after looking at what was going on in some of the textile techniques around the world, these people are kind of fearless, and they somehow or other can throw everything in together. So when I was at art school, there was some teachers that say, oh, if you use more than 3 colours, it's just going to look like a mess. And then I saw this sort of stuff, and there's like way more than 3 colours in there, and it doesn't look like a mess. And so I was like, okay, be fearless. And so I started making more work that was really referencing weaving techniques around the world. And it was interesting because people were looking at the things that I was exhibiting, and they would say, oh, it looks like weaving, or it looks like this, or it looks like that. And as soon as people decide that it looks like something, they get engaged. They start to think about the work, and as soon as they're engaged, you got them. And so it becomes interesting. So I also was really interested in textile. My family had been farming in the lower and mid-north of Australia for since the mid-1800s. And there was a farm that was really special to me that my father inherited when I was younger. And so I was looking at, in the abstract paintings and stuff, there was a lot of landscape stuff that was going on. And I was looking at other textile works. These were quilts that were made by sharecroppers in Alabama, in Gee's Bend. And there's, you know, it sort of seemed to me like there was a lot of similarities between a lot of the stuff they were making and a lot of the abstract expressionist paintings that was going on at around the same time in further north in New York City. And there was a lot of landscape sort of references going on in there. And they were making quilts out of old jeans and stuff like that. And, you know, I was just looking at this stuff and going, it's a landscape, and just figuring out how I could sort of use abstraction to represent the connection that I was feeling to different bits of land, and sort of talking about the story about how my feet were, how I was coming out of a history of farming, but also connecting to the land was really important in order for me to be able to speak about what was important to me. So, and because I was traveling around a lot, I was in airplanes because I was traveling to Europe and the United States, doing little bits of teaching and exhibiting and stuff like that. I got fortunate enough to teach in Switzerland every year for about 5 or 6 years, and in France as well, and then eventually a little bit in the United States. But flying around a lot, I'd take a lot of photographs out of airplanes, and, you know, I was just thinking about the abstraction and the landscape and stuff. So I made a lot of series of vessels that were about sort of aerial views. And at the same time, I went to see an exhibition at the Australian National Gallery that was called The Sense of Place or something. And there was a bunch of Indigenous Australian artists and some white Australian artists. And there was a lot of talks that I went to where some of the Indigenous people were saying, oh, they do this overhead paintings of landscape because it's much more interactive. And they're saying, oh, the Western way is you're looking at it through a window and it's like you're separate from the landscape, but the overhead view, you aren't separate, you're part of it, and it's like a map and you can see. So I was interested in ideas about that when you're looking down and sort of a map view. So yeah, I've like boxes and boxes of photographs, this is before digital, of pictures I took out of airplanes, and you couldn't ever show them because they were always misty, but now I scan them and you can Photoshop them and make them look better. Yeah, so I was always traveling around and thinking about other art that I was finding inspiring. And, you know, I'd look at these colours and then come up with work like this. And the other sort of European ideas of maps. The technique that I figured out, so I got exposed to this coloured sheet glass that they make in Portland, Oregon, which is a really interesting and unique material. So they have like 70 or 80 different colours that always work together. You can always melt them together and turn them into stuff. And that sort of thing is pretty unprecedented. And so I started using that product to make my work, and just making patterns and putting them together and stretching them down. And I became a lot more interested in urban landscape as well. So I was looking at different architecture. I eventually ended up living in New York City for a few years and looking at how, you know, I look out my window and there's a whole wall of, you know, a skyscraper or something like that. And all of that sort of started to creep into my work. And this series of work happened that was really about urban landscape. And, you know, kept on looking at other aerial photographs. This is a Dutch guy, Edward Bertinsky, who takes photographs of like destroyed mine landscapes. And so this is a very tragic picture of a piece of land that's just been destroyed by a tailings dam, but it's visually quite interesting and it looks like an abstract painting or something. So I was looking at all of these different things, and essentially just thinking about my own connection to the landscape and massively how important that is, because if you're not connected to a place or something, you're kind of just floating in space, and you can't really have much of a discussion with people about anything unless your discussion is about how disconnected you are. But yeah, just had a huge amount of fun making different patterns and different objects, and I was being very fortunate because I had gallery representation who liked my work and got excited about it, and when the gallery is excited about it, they find it really easy to place it in people's houses. So I had like a couple of decades of really, you know, being able to spend huge amounts of time making lots and lots of work, and the galleries wanted it, and having a lot of reasonably successful exhibitions around the place. But you can see, like, this is a really close-up, that's a close-up of a thing that is maybe 5 centimetres square, but there's just insane amounts of information going on. So I was always interested in that idea, well, other urban and industrial landscapes, but I was interested in that idea of proximity. So when you, and that whole fractal idea, so when you're further away from something and it all starts to look like there's order, and you get a bit closer and it gets really chaotic, and then you move even closer and there's more layers of order, and the notion that one tiny little piece can have all the information that's displayed in a huge thing. So like you think about an atom and then or a molecule, and there's the information in that describes the gene, and then the gene describes the creature or whatever. But I was always looking at like decaying landscapes, and living in America I've lived there 3 different occasions now, and always looking at like just how much decay there is in the urban landscape there. But I made a bunch of big solid blocks that were really referencing urban landscapes in the United States. These is more close-ups. So yeah, these are colours of the front paddocks of the farms, and so I was just taking all of that stuff and just putting it straight into the work that I was making. So sort of a combination of a weird map with crazy detail in it, using the colours of that landscape, and trying to always hang on to the glass-like qualities that are, so everything's, you know, trying to hang on to a bit of transparency and sort of organic things. And because I was travelling a lot, like a lot of people who work with hot glass, you get sort of a little bit sucked in by Venice and Venetian glass and stuff. And I was really lucky. My gallerist, like I said, was friends with, and she was curating shows for, retrospective shows for Venini glass. So I got to meet Anna Venini, and she took me around to see a lot of stuff in Venice. These are just some process shots of all of the little squares that I make, and melting them together, rolling them onto a glass blowing pipe and closing it into a cylinder while making a funny face and melting it. And once it's a cylinder, it's really similar to regular glass blowing, except it's sort of quite different, which everyone's learning about today. This was in Wheaton Village in New Jersey, which is a big glass blowing place in America. And all of the work that I make, I grind and polish the whole surface of everything. So what I was going back to say is, spending a lot of time in Venice and on the lagoon there's a lot of different visual art and architecture and craft practices going on. And I was already interested in textiles I got really interested in some of the lace and weaving traditions in Venice. And one of the glass guys who'd sort of taught me at one point said that there was a filigrana technique, which is a way of putting stripes in glass, and that was done, there was a rumour that it was done as homage to a woman whose mother made lace. So he was either trying to impress the mother so that he could marry her daughter or something like that. And I just got to thinking, oh, what if he was a guy that made Marini instead of striped glass or whatever, and what would that look like? So I started a whole series of glass where I was imagining I was paying homage to the lace makers in Burano, and so I started trying to make lace, and then I was looking at doilies and lace and other uses that lace had, and found out that there'd been similar types of thing being going on using a really different technique in Venice, where they'd been using a technique which I ended up using to make lace type stuff, but I could never find any actual Marini that had been made to sort of talk about lace, except one. And so there was a guy called Ercole Barovia, who was part of the Barovia family, and in the corner of his bedroom in the palazzo where they lived, there's a disc about that big, and it's a piece of lace Marini that has been made, and that's the only bit of lace Marini that I've been able to find that was made in Venice. But anyway, so I made lots of pieces in the series looking at ideas about lace. And the more I looked at lace, I could see crossovers between Gothic architecture patterns and lace and stuff. So I started looking at the ornamentation that was happening in architecture, and then using, similar to what I did with the weaving stuff and the landscapes, I was using lace motifs to make architectural patterns in pieces like this. So I made a whole bunch of big square and round plates that were big pieces of glass lace, and all different vessels with, again, like insane Marini. I always used to joke to the gallerists that I should be selling magnifying glasses with the work, because a lot of the really neat stuff that's going on, you've got to get real close to it to see. So here you can see some of the more architectural sort of patterns coming into the things. I was looking at different churches and porticos and stuff, and of course Piazza San Marco, which has all of those incredible arches all the way around it, 2 or 3 levels of them, and just, yeah, always looking at cross-referencing different things into a certain thing. So I'm taking 2 or 3 things and putting them into the thing, and I was always thinking about how to excite people's eyes, because I like seeing art and objects and stuff that people make, I am always excited when I see something that's like, I'm looking at it and going, oh, what's going on there, or that's a bit weird, or there's something a bit off, or so I was always thinking, how do I excite people's eyes by looking at stuff? So you do the pattern, then put one sideways or something, and everyone's going, hang on, what's going on? And then you're engaged, you're thinking about it. But so, yeah, I went to different cities in Italy and looking at this. I mean, they were making a whole bunch of lace out of marble on a giant tower up in the sky, like in the Renaissance, insane stuff. But there's some level of passion and a huge amount of money, and that allows that to happen. More architectural stuff creeping in, and then eventually the little references that I'm making in there just gets more and more abstract and weird. So I just make tons and tons of lots of little parts and put them together to make bigger pieces, and then I'd make something, and then someone at the gallery would say, oh, could you make another one of those? And I'd look at it and go, there's no way I could make another one of those because it was just too much. And then, because there's so many little bits, and then, you know, that's just a really simple pattern, but there's, you know, tens of thousands of pieces of glass just in that, all the little strips put in there. It's a bit OCD. Yeah, I made some really big platters. I guess they were like 50 centimeters square, and just really, I love them. I really wish I kept some of them, but people wanted them. And the people that are in the class, there's a few pieces there that I've got a couple of slices of that you can see, like going up in the corners, the little Fs and stuff like that. So I've just been working on this work and the landscape stuff, and a few other experiments. And then, I guess, 2016 or something, I moved back to New Orleans in America, and sort of everything got thrown up in the air a bit. And eventually, sort of, I had a couple of exhibitions, but really stopped making stuff and just went around the place in the United States teaching classes at various art and craft schools in the United States, which was really cool. With the aim of setting up a studio in New Orleans, but that didn't end up happening, and ended up moving back here. I'm glad. So I moved back here in 2018, the end of 2018, and that was really great. More landscape photographs. So, like, you could see the irrigation, the rotary irrigation circles and stuff, so I was sort of making my version of them out of the glass patterns and putting them in vessels. The other thing that I did a while back was build a studio in my backyard, which was probably one of the best things that I'd ever done. So all sorts of people had said to me, oh, you can't have your studio in your backyard, you end up working all the time and you won't be able to have a separation of a life and stuff, and I don't have a problem not working. So in the studio, it's right there, the commute time is awesome. It's like, and I can do a little bit and then go and do some garden and then do a little bit there, and then I've got some kids, and so go look after the kids a bit and go do a bit more glass. And all my kids have seen, you know, they think they're probably going to rebel and be accountants or something like that, but they, you know, someone making glass in the backyard is like, oh Jesus, you're going to make glass again. But yeah, just traveling around places and on the farms, like this is the block of an old tractor that's rusting on the farm. I had a background in metals, so I sort of have made a few different metal sculptures as fun, thinking, oh, you know, wouldn't that be really great? And then I make a few metal things and go, oh, that's why I didn't like doing metals, because it's kind of stinky and really dirty. But yeah, made a few sculptures that are kicking around the place. So sort of thinking about Marinis and rolled hollow section steel. But I got into a lot of floors in Venice. So there was a lot of mosaic floors and walls and stuff like that. And one of the guys that helped me a lot with lots of things, this fellow Lino Talipietro, showed me a bunch of really cool floors and helped me figure out ways of getting glass into concrete so that it would actually work. So I did a lot of research of stuff that he'd shown me, and then some other people had shown me, and then talking to people in America who are pretty nuts about terrazzo, and just figuring out how to make getting glass into cement, because cement is very alkali, and so it will actually corrode the glass pretty quickly. But if you use the right cement, it's not alkali, and the white cement is a lot lower alkali than the grey Portland cement, so that generally works with not chewing the glass up so much. So I made a bunch of glass in floors, some in the United States and some in my house and in some other places. But it's a really difficult thing to get concreters to want to work with you putting glass in floors. There's some really great ones who'll do it, and then the square foot thing is really expensive to get it done. And so the first thing when the budget starts to tighten up, the first thing that they get rid of is the art. So I didn't really get to do a lot of that. But it's a really interesting thing to look at in Europe with the inclusion of glass in mosaic floors and stuff. So yeah, all through, I've always been looking at different experiments and different things. Some things I like better than others, but then I guess, I didn't make a lot of work until about 2018 again, and made a couple of exhibitions in the United States. So this is very recent stuff from 2018. I made a whole bunch of things where I was thinking about cells and cell division and stuff like that, and looking at different ways that I could put some of that in the work. So me and my partner, the last year that we lived in the United States, went around and taught at 3 different places. So I made one of these things at each different place we taught as a demo, and then just recently had an exhibition at Sabia Gallery, and this is one of the things that was there. And this was another one that was at Sabia Gallery, more landscape sort of based work. And it's not such a good photograph, but I was messing around with some solid glass things, and the idea of a square, like real geometric object with a really glass, like sort of drippy liquid thing on top of it. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing recently, is messing around, making different things that are not vessels and trying some different experiments. And I don't know where that's going to go, but I've got a huge pile of stuff sitting in my studio that I'm going to make into some things in the next few months. And yeah, just keep pushing on. And it's really great to be here at the JamFactory showing all the kids some of the stuff that I know. And yeah, so thank you.